Bezos Hashem. Today's daf is Masechta Baba Basra Daf Chaf, number 20. And we're going to begin on Daf Chaf Amid Aleph from the second line, but it refers back to a statement that was mentioned yesterday. And let's get the picture of this, what we're discussing over here. You can see the picture on the screen over here, and I'll send it out. Maybe I sent it out yesterday also from Daf Yud Tes. Um, there's a concept called a corpse tuma, right? A corpse, and it could go from one room to the next if there is a hole of a tefach. If there's a hole in the wall of a tefach, you can see that this corpse will transfer the tuma to the next room. However, because they're under the same roof. However, if you clogged the hole with something, so then, if it's no longer a tefach, it blocks the tumah from transferring to the next room. The question is, if you block, Shmuel made a statement that if you were going to use a blockage, let's say you use wafers, good, or matzah, whatever you want, a food item, let's say. So that's not good enough for being a blockage. Why? Even though temporarily you blocked it up with food, but eventually people are going to remove that blockage, are going to eat the food. So therefore, it won't be considered to be a good blockage. So let's read from the Gemara on Daf Yud Tes base just to see this statement of Shmuel, and the rest of the Daf is basically just questioning the validity of what Shmuel just said. Amrav Toivi Bakisno Mar Shmuel Rakik, a piece of wafer, right, a food item, will not limit or minimize the window. So if you have a tefach of a window, and you just put in between in the window, you put some wafers, so that is not good enough because the wafers are going to be eventually removed, and so therefore the tumah will transfer despite that there's wafers over there. Okay, now let's go to Daf Yud Tes Amud Aleph. Okay, 4 lines from the top. Meisvei. Let us ask a question against Shmuel. We're going to prove what the Gemara is trying to prove is that even things that you're going to eventually remove from the window, as long as you didn't remove it, it's still considered a good blockage. That's what the Gemara is going to ask. Meisvei, let me ask you a question. The Mishnah says, the Brisa says, "Esavim grass shetolshan," that you pulled it out of the ground, grass that you pulled out of the ground. The inichon b'chalayim, and you put it by the window. Or grass that grew by itself by the windows. So let's say you have pieces of cloth that don't have a measurement of 3 by 3. So you have all these things that are possibly things that are at the window. Va'aver, v'habasar, let's say you have a limb or some flesh. Hamudul dalim b'behem b'chaya. That's like semi-connected or semi-severed from an animal. Let's say an animal has a little finger that somehow is not so connected to its body. That is in the window. Okay, or let's say you have a oif sheshachin b'chalain, or a bird that rested in the window, right, in that window. The goy sheyashim b'chalain, or a little guy, a human sat at that window. All these things are going to be good blockages. Uben shmoina, you have a kid that's born on the 8th month. This is a crucial not a crucial, but it's an indication of how science was viewed in the time of Chazal, that a kid that's born on the 8th month is not going to be living anymore. It cannot grow into a normal human being, and therefore, if you have a kid at that window, a baby at that window, that will block the passage of the tumah. Hamuna b'chalayim, that's by the window. Melech, you have salt, or clay cheres, or an earthenware keli, the sefer Torah, or you put a sefer Torah by the window. Kula mamata b'chaloin. All these things can limit the tefach of the window, and the tumah will not transfer. Again, if you have all these things in this window over here, a baby or whatever you have there, it blocks the transfer of tumah, of the corpse tumah, from one room to the next. Now, aval shelik, but let's say you have snow there, v'abar v'aglid, or different types of ice, right? V'akvar, or hail, or ice, or frosting. Vahamayim or water. Now, water in a pitcher. Kulam they don't work to limit the window. Why? Because water in a pitcher, without the pitcher, the water can't stand on its own. It will melt away, and all the snow will melt away. And the fact that it's in a pitcher, and this is a very crucial point, and I must mention this. In order to be something that can block the tumah, it itself cannot be makabel tumah. Okay, it itself cannot be makabel tumah. Like a goy that's sitting on the window, a goy is not makabel tumah. A bird is not makabel tumah. So a dead baby, like is not makabel tumah. So therefore, the pitcher without the water without the pitcher is nothing, because the water without a pitcher cannot stay by itself. It will just wash away. So therefore, all those things don't limit the window. So now the Gemara is going to take apart. If Shmuel is correct, and that eventually, if you leave something at that window that you're going to eventually remove, that's not considered a blockage. So the Gemara says, if you leave grass there, you're eventually going to remove it from the window. Chazu lavehemte, because you can use it for your animal. So why does the Brisa say that it's a good blockage? Answers the Gemara, but afrasta. The Brisa is talking about such a type of grass that would be poisonous for the animal. Or if grass grew by itself. The Gemara says, if grass grew out of the wall, imagine grass growing out of the wall over here, right? Grass coming out of the wall. You can eventually remove that grass because it can damage the wall. Shakalhu. So why is that considered to be, according to Shmuel, why would that be considered to be a good blockage? Amar Abba, the kaisel churva. That Bryce is talking about a kaisel that's a destroyed kaisel, or it's a wall that people don't care so much about, and therefore it's an abandoned wall. So therefore that could be a good blockage. Now, Papa Amma feel it because you should, even if it could be talking about a kaisel that is a usable wall. People are living there. It means there's 3 tefachim away from the kaisel. So imagine that over here it grew, the grass grew not in the wall, but 3 tefachim away from the wall and grew towards the wall. So even then, that would be considered a nice blockage. Matloinus, if you have, let's say, rags that are less than 3 by 3 etzbois. But you could use it. You could use it as a patch. So if you have a little, so again, why is that considered something that's a blockage? You're going to eventually use it to, let's say, patch up a hole in your pants. Answers the Gemara, bis mikasa, it's too thick, and therefore it's not usable as a patch for an item of clothing. Says the Gemara, chazul umana, and maybe it's good for a bloodletter. A bloodletter doesn't care on the material of in fact, something that's thicker may be better for a bloodletter to use as to cover the wound. And for Gemara beriska, it has points out of it, like thorns coming out of it, and therefore it's very uncomfortable to put that on a wound. Iberiska she'ein behem shalash shalash. Iberiska she'ein behem shalash shalash she'ein behem abal abari baile. If we're talking about it has points, let's say like a sackcloth. So a sackcloth, a sack. Why does the Brisa say that it doesn't have 3 by 3? It should say that it doesn't have 4 by 4, because a sack has a bigger size than an item of clothing. So why does it say ein b'shalosh shalosh? And so the Gemara ke'ein riska. We're talking about really it's a cloth, but it has uncomfortable points coming out of it, and therefore it is like a sackcloth, albeit it's not a sackcloth. Okay. Now, one of the things that the Brisa said that is not a blockage is you have a eva v'habasa hamudodalim b'behema v'chaya. You have, let's say, an animal. Imagine an animal right in this window, and it has let's say it's standing by the window, and it has this funny finger that's semi-severed blocking in the window. So it's the Gemara, an animal standing by the window. Why is that a good blockage? Or it's going to eventually run away. And says the Gemara Bekshura, the Bryce is talking about the animals tied down. So wait a second. If it's a kosher animal, shachadla, you're going to want to slaughter it. You're not going to leave it there forever. And says the Gemara B'Tmeya, it's talking about a non-kosher animal. Says the Gemara, even if it's a non-kosher animal, you're going to sell it to a Gentile. Answers the Gemara, it's talking about a very sick animal, and even a guy wouldn't buy it. Said the Gemara, even if it's a sick animal, pasuk shadalei leklavim, you're going to release it and give it to dogs. Answers the Gemara, keeping the ikitsar balachaim loy of it. Since there is pain for a live animal, you're just going to leave it there. So you're more inclined to leave it there for a long time and let it stay there than to walk around your house. And even though it has these limbs coming off of it, so therefore this type of animal, according to the way the Gemara is learning, could be considered a blockage. It's not something you can eventually take away from that hole. Let's say you have a bird that just landed at that window. According to Shmuel, the bird's going to leave, so that's not a good blockage. So that's the Gemara's question. Parach ba'azal, but it's going to fly away and disappear. Answers the Gemara b'kosher. When the Brisa says it's a good blockage, it's talking about it's tied up. Says the Gemara shachali, but you're going to slaughter it. Answers the Gemara b'tamei, it's a tamei bird. So okay, it's not a kosher bird. Mizaba le'legoy, but then you're going to sell it to a Gentile. Answers the Gemara b'kalunusa. It's talking about a type of bird that's very sickly, and it's not edible for any human being. Okay, if it's such a sick bird, yav leila yunuka, you can give it to a child to play with as a pet bird. And says the Gemara b'mesaret, it has, let's say, long nails or something. It could scratch, and therefore you wouldn't give it to a child that plays. And says the Gemara, kilanusa leila mesaret, the type of bird of a kalanusa does not have long nails, doesn't scratch if it's so weak. And it's like this kalanusa bird, but it's not the kalanusa bird, because whereas a kalanusa bird will not scratch, this one will scratch, and that's the type of bird that you're going to just leave in that window and be done with it. A goy that sat by the window, says the Gemara, the guys are going to get up and walk away. Answers the Gemara b'kafos. We're talking about a guy that's tied up and sitting by the window. Says the Gemara, his friend is going to come and release him. Answers the Gemara b'mitzara. We're talking about a guy that is stricken with leprosy and is in quarantine, so he's not going to move away from that window. Says the Gemara, is another leaper who is also sickly like him, will come to release him. So the Gemara says, no, we're talking about a goy that was, he's caught there and he's tied up because he was arrested. So he's going to stay there. You're not going to move him right away. So therefore, if he's stuck in this window, again, you have a goy that's lying down, handcuffed to the window, so he can be a blockage for corpse tumor from passing through, because nobody's going to release him. Uben shmoina hamuna b'chalayin. You have an 8-month-old baby that's sitting in that window. Says the Gemara, Ase ime daryale, but isn't his mother going to pick it up and take it, even though it's not going to live so long? But his mother is going to remove it. And says the Gemara b'Shabbos. The Gemara is talking about it's on Shabbos, and it's also deathly sick. So therefore, this baby is just going to remain on that window. The Tanya we learned in the Mishnah, Brisa, Ben Shmoina, if you have an 8-month-old baby, in other words, it was only in the mother's stomach for 8 months, and then it was born, it can't live. Hareiku Evan, you consider it like a rock. You can't remove it on Shabbos. The mother who is engorged with milk can bend over and try to nurse it, but you can't touch it on Shabbos. And it's a sickly baby, so you're not going to move it anyway. And therefore, that's considered a blockage of tumah. Blockage for the tumah to pass to the next rule. Melech, if you have salt, says the Gemara, if you put salt in that window, imagine, and it makes it less than a tefa, chazile. If salt is edible, you can use it for food. And says the Gemara, b'merirta, it's talking about bitter salt. Says the Gemara, bitter salt, chazile iris, you can use it for tanning. And says the Gemara, dispe koitzi, it has type of thorns that would not be good for leather, and you'll scratch your hands. In other words, you can't deal with it because it's too sharp. Okay, the Gemara says, but you're going to remove the salt anyway that's on the wall. Came in the kashi lekoisel shaklit. Since this is going to be, it will cause salt on a wall, will cause erosion, you're going to remove it. So even if it's over here in that window, if you have salt over there, you're going to keep you're going to remove it. Answers the Gemara, the yaspa achaspa, the salt is lying on a let's say a candy dish, okay, a earthen candy dish. Frag the Gemara chaspa gufa teichetz, this earthenware candy dish, let's say, that itself should be a chatzitza. If the salt is on that dish and the dish is on that wall, in that hole, in that window, it should also be a chatzitza. Answers the Gemara, we go to Chafam and Beis, the Lesle Bishira, talking about like a type of dish, a type of earthenware keli that is too small. We learned in the Mishnah, there's a certain type of shear of an earthenware keli regarding carrying on Shabbos, that we talk about slats of a window and a wall. So there's a certain shear that they give for a kli cheres that you fit between the slats. Whatever it is, the bottom line is that we're talking about a type of cheres that doesn't have a shear. So if it doesn't have a shear, it's not considered a cheres of anything, and therefore it's not going to be a chetzitza. It's not going to minimize the opening of the hole. Okay, like exactly what Taisa says. Pirish ain't shear lechaspon l'mayim mi poiseach dafach. It doesn't meet the minimum size to minimize that hole of a tefach. The Gemara says klei cheres. If you have the Mishnah's Brisa says that if you have let's say you have a cup, an earthenware cup, that will minimize the hole. Frag the Gemara, why should that minimize the hole? Chazila, you're going to use that. Let's say you want to take a drink, you're going to use it. Answers the Gemara, we're talking about the bintanef. It's a dirty type of klei cheres, dirty type of cup. Says the Gemara, Chazila mana. But that's somebody who's a bloodletter could use that. So he's going to eventually remove it. Answers the Gemara, the minkav, the Bryce is talking about it had a hole in it. So certainly nobody's going to remove it. So if you have an earthenware cup in that hole, that would minimize the hole, and therefore the tumah will not transfer. Sefer Torah, if you put a Sefer Torah there, what do you mean? Everybody picks up a Sefer Torah, Chayzel Mikra. Everybody will take it to remove it and read from it. And says the Gemara Babolu, it's talking about a Sefer Torah that is worn out. Nobody uses it anymore. Says the Gemara Baboya Geniza, but you have to bury it. You can't just leave it there. And says the Gemara Sham Tehei Genizasim. Over there, you're going to bury it. In other words, you're leaving it there for a while until you have the opportune time and the place to bury it. So therefore, it's going to stay in that hole for a long time. And therefore, that's why the Brisa says that will be a good mechitza, a good blockage of the hole. Amar Rav said, Bakoil ois mechitza. You can use anything to make that wall, to make that separation. Chutz memelach uravav. You can't use salt. Uravav is grease. Okay, because grease you can understand because salt spreads out. Rav says, and grease, even if you have a hard piece of fat, once it gets hot outside, it's going to melt. So therefore, it's going to disappear. So that's not considered a good separation. Shmuel says afila melach. You could use salt as a blockage for the hole. Amar Papa explained, V'loi pligi, they're not arguing. Rav and Shmuel are not arguing. Ha b'melech stoimis. Melech stoimis is very, very thick and hard like a stone. Therefore, according to Shmuel was talking about melech stoimis, Sodom salt, and therefore that's a good mechitza. Ha b'melech istroikonis. Istroikonis means salt, regular salt, table salt. So that's that doesn't clump, and if it clumps and you touch it a little bit, it'll spread, it'll collapse. So therefore, that's why Rava says melach salt is not a good mechitza. Rabba said, now that Rabba said, for a mavi, right? Let's say at the end of a mavi, you want to make a cross beam and you put 2 pillars of salt. That's a good eruv, right? That's a good mavi. That's a good eruv for a mavi. So you're allowed to make 2 piles of salt and put a beam on it. Shahamelach, when you have salt, mamedes is karev, mamedes is a melech. They keep each other in place. Salt will keep the beam in place, and the beam will keep the salt in place so that it doesn't collapse. So afila a melech is draconis. You could say that Rav and Shmuel were arguing a regular table salt. V'loi pligi, they're not arguing. When Shmuel said that it's a good it's good. It's a good mechitza if you put salt there. Is if there's a crossbeam over the salt which holds it in place so it will not collapse. Rav says that it's not a good mechitza. It's talking about regular salt with no crossbeam on it, and therefore it could technically over time, even when you put it there, it was hard, but then somebody will hit it and it'll collapse. So therefore, Rav said that would not be a good mechitza. So I just want to call up the picture over here. This is what the Mishnah said, and maybe I sent it to you. Let's say your friend has a wall. So if this is a rechayim, let's just get the picture straight. Okay, if you can see it over here, this is an oven. So there's a base for the oven, which is wider than the oven itself. So you have to keep the base of the oven 3 tvachim from the wall, and the oven itself 4 tvachim from the wall, because as you see, it narrows upwards. And same thing with a millstone. You have a base of the millstone, so that's wider than the top millstone. The bottom millstone is wider than the top millstone. So therefore, 3 tvachim from the wall or 4 tvachim from the wall. Again, the Mishnah was discussing that if your friend has a wall, you have to keep your material far from his wall, enough far from his wall that you're not going to damage his wall. Okay? So now the Gemara is discussing over here. So what is the reason why you have to keep a millstone 3 tvachim from the wall? And says the Gemara Mishum Turya. The Gemara held because of the sound vibrations. When you're going to use your millstone, it's going to damage his wall. Says the Gemara, but Tanya, we learned in a brisa, Vishal Chamor, Shloisha min Esther Bayub, Shein Abba Menakelis, also my Tiriika. In other words, in a brisa it says that, look at this, you could use a mini millstone, right over here with a donkey, and again, 3 from the bottom, 4 from the top, and it's quiet. This is the more quieter version of grinding your wheat. So again, what would be the problem? Why do you have to distance it from the wall? What kind of sound waves are there? Elam Shim Kolam. The fact is that it's not vibrations. It's the noise that comes out of using a millstone that comes out. That's uncomfortable to do it right up against the wall of your friend. So you have to distance it from his place 3 or 4 tvachim. There's a tanur. And an oven. Your friend has an oven. Shloshim and Akili Shein of Bom and Asafa. Omar Abaya. Shma Mina. From here we see Kali the Tanu Tafach. The base of an oven is a tefach. Nafkamina lemekach memka. If it's this is, what do I need to know that? I'm not building a Talmud type of oven, but if you're doing a sales with somebody, so you know that when you're buying an oven, you're buying a base that's just 1 tefach bigger than the oven itself, and if he sells you something smaller, you know you got ripped off. Okay, new Mishnah. Lo yamed adam tana b'soich habayis elam kem yesh gabav kos. Let's see the picture, and it'll be very simple. Right over here, you have 2 floors. One guy owns the bottom floor, and the other guy owns the top floor. So you can't put your oven on top of the bottom floor unless there's 4 amas to the roof. And the same thing, the guy on the top floor can't put his oven unless he has a base of 3 tefachim on the bottom. Again, heat rises, so therefore you need more of a distance from your oven, from the bottom floor oven to the top guy's floor or his roof. And from the top guy, he needs to have a protection of 3 tvachim. Again, in order not to start a fire, chas v'shalom. So let's go back into the Mishnah. A person should not put an oven in the house. Till you have on top of it 4 amas. If you put it if you're putting an oven on top floor, make sure there's a protection underneath of 3 tvachim. Uvakira tefach. Using a mini oven, use a tefach. Limhizik. If you followed all the building codes, mishalim, and a fire broke out, mishalim asher hizik, you have to pay whatever you did damage. Reb Shimon says, Reb Shimon said that no, all these measurements, all these shiurim were said that if you followed the building code, you're exempt from paying. One should not open a store, a bakery underneath the storage of your friend. In other words, if your friend, again, let's call up the picture. If your friend is storing wheat over here, you can't open a bakery because your smoke will end up ruining his wheat. But Be'emes amru, and you can't open a barn down there because the smell will ruin his wheat. Be'emes amru b'yayin itiru, but if the guy's storing wine up on the second floor, you're allowed to open a bakery because smoke is very good for wine. Avaloi refes bakar, you can't use a smelly refes bakar over there. You can't put a barn underneath. Let's just finish to the next Mishnah, which is another minute and a half. Says the Gemara, Tanya, we learned in Brisa, Batana Abava Kir Shloisha. In another Brisa, it seems to contradict our Mishnah that for a Tanner, you have to wait, you have to keep 4 amas, right? From underneath it, 4 tfachim underneath it, and Akira 3. And our Brisa says a Tanner is 3 and Akira is 1 tefach. So it depends what type of oven you're using. If you're using a commercial oven, that Brisa is talking about a commercial oven. Therefore, you have to add extra protection. Our Mishnah is talking about a regular, non-commercial oven. Let's say the guy opened the barn first, then mutter. Then that's it. You don't have to have him remove his barn because somebody decides to store wheat on the second floor. Boya baya kibev reach loitza mao ribe b'chalanis mao achsar taksoitz mao. Basically, Abaya was asking a question. Okay, if you can tell that the guy who's fixing the upstairs floor is doing indications that he's going to put wheat there by, let's say, adding windows there or cleaning it up, but he didn't store anything yet. Does that stop you from opening a barn on the downstairs floor? He didn't put anything up there yet, but you can see that he wants to do that. Teku, that's a question. Boya Rav Huna Bereitev Shu Tamar Virmoni Mani. Let's say he didn't store wheat there, but he stored dates and pomegranates. But once you start storing stuff there, eventually you're going to store wheat there. So maybe the guy cannot open a barn underneath that. Teku, this is not a question. The emes b'yainitura. We said in the Mishnah that if the guy on the second floor stores wine, right, then you're allowed to put a bakery underneath because the smoke is very good for wine. So Tana, we learned you can open a bakery on the bottom floor if the guy's storing wine on the top floor because the smoke of the baker of the oven going into the wine only makes the wine better. But you can't open a barn down there because it's a stench that goes into the wine. That's no good. Amar Yosef, Haidi done. The Babylonian wine, even smoke from a candle is not good for the wine. So it depends what wine. Israeli wine, it would be good. The smoke is good for the Israeli wine. But for a Babylonian wine, the smoke is no good. Therefore, you're not allowed to open a barn underneath somebody storing wine on the second floor. You don't have to even open a barn. That's no good. We said you're not allowed to open a barn on the downstairs because there's a stench. Even storing smelly fodder, animal food, is also no good because that also gives a stench again to the one that is storing stuff on the upstairs floor. Again, the Mishnah is continuing along with how you're supposed to protect yourself from damaging other people. Okay, we'll stop right here.